Hello, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We're looking forward to speaking with you about what we learned at our customer user group event, Connect 2022, and about how our customers are powering healthier outcomes with healthier data. So as always, I'll kick us off with a few logistical reminders. So we are broadcasting live and recording this session. Anyone who registered for this event, whether they're attending right now or not, will receive a link to the recording within 24 hours. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to send them over in the chat. Everyone except the presenters are muted, but we are monitoring the chat and can bring them up as we go. So, and if we don't get to all the questions, we will also be able to follow up with you after with the contact information that you provided when registering. So the format we'll cover today is a conversation between Michelle, Drew, and myself. So how lucky am I to get their time today to have this discussion with them and then also with you as we debrief our favorite findings from the event. And so the topics we'll cover today primarily are going to be what we learned about why and how teams are migrating integration to the cloud. We'll talk about API adoption strategies that we learned about, different use cases where our customers are adopting APIs to integrate. We'll share with you how attendees were thinking about enterprise data management, including identity and clinical terminology data. And we'll hit a bit on the emphasis we heard throughout the event around privacy and security. Before we begin, let's do some introduction. My name is Shelly Waymeyer, and I am the Director of Product and Partner Marketing at Lineate. I come from a background of EHR, implementation, and product management, and my why for being in healthcare IT is to empower clinicians to do what they do best, putting the technology behind the scenes, and so ensuring it helps their workloads be more efficient. Well, let me pass it over to Michelle and then Drew to introduce themselves.
Thanks, Shelly. Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Blackmer. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Lineate. I've been at Lineate for 2 years and started my career implementing electronic medical records. I felt the pain firsthand of not being able to get the data, make the data accessible to the people who really needed it. And I spent the rest of my career in kind of at the middleware layer, making data exchange and data management possible. Drew?
Thanks. I'm Drew Ivan, the Chief Strategy Officer. I've been around integration for a long time and healthcare IT since about 2000. So for sure, we're understanding that there's a lot of work to do, and there's always more to do. So as long as we work on it, there's still more out there.
Awesome. Thank you, Michelle and Drew. And before we really dive in, I thought I'd steal a page out of Drew's book. So during Drew's keynote at Connect, he used images generated by the AI bot Dolly to illustrate his point. And so I had a little fun in preparing for this webinar, and I searched, no, not their name. They're not in that AI bot yet, but I searched their titles. So I searched Chief Marketing Officer, Chief Strategy Officer, and Chief Product and Partner, Director of Product and Partner Marketing, and these are the images I got, and I thought they were quite fitting. So a little surprise.
I like them, Shelly. Yeah, they look very personalized.
Yeah.
I've always wanted a crown, so I'm happy.
I picked the crown one on purpose there. I don't know, are you a chess player, Drew?
I'm terrible at chess.
Yeah. Well, Dolly tried.
Very nice. That's fun.
All right. Well, on to Connect, a little bit of a summary for those who couldn't attend. We had nearly 150 attendees. We had 42 of those attendees who participated in the pre-event training. We had 11 customer showcases throughout the 2.5 days of sessions, 25 sessions in total, with 10 exhibiting partners who also presented and got to learn from the session. In addition, we had 3 deep dive roundtables where we had representatives from our product management, development, and support teams answering frequently asked questions, troubleshooting tips, and talking about recent releases. And then, of course, opportunities to network that included 3 networking parties. And I've always wanted to use this martini icon, so I got to use it today. So that's a win for me.
That's a win.
Beyond the numbers, Michelle and Drew, what were your biggest takeaways from the event?
Well, I think it's hard to have an event these days and not take away that how happy people are to be able to connect in person. And so that was sort of top of mind for me. And I heard that over and over from the attendees. They were just really glad to reconnect, to have the opportunity to talk in person and meet new people off of the video camera.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that, it's the first time maybe in 2 or 3 years that we've connected in such a rich, high bandwidth way with these customers. So a big topic that we talked about was, what has changed during the pandemic? How has it impacted your day-to-day as well as your, your strategy? So there were a lot of conversations about that, which it's a good checkpoint to see, get the perspective of all of our customers on how they're doing business in the post-pandemic times.
I remember in conversation with you after the event where you called out, it was cool to see the transfer of what Lineate does to solve problems put into the hands of our customers, who are then solving different problems using our solutions. I think maybe it was in Alice County session too that you brought that up in the public health space.
Yeah, exactly. Because we are in the business of building software tools. But our customers are in the business of using those tools to solve their problems, and so we're not always aware, and we definitely can't imagine beforehand all the different ways our customers will put our tools to use. So that's those 11 customer sessions that were highlighted on the previous slide were really the highlight for me, because we got to see in a deep way not just what they were doing, but in a lot of cases what the impact was, like what are the measurable outcomes of the ways they put our tools to use.
Yeah, echoing that and seeing the slide, which has so many, just pictures of people interacting, reminds me what you're saying, Drew. Like when Darren presented from University of Louisville, he talked about how they were divested and they had to quickly stand up a new integration engine, and they looked to Rhapsody, moved it to the cloud to do that. And then the way that they've grown and scaled their team and the problems that they've tackled with Rhapsody just reminded me how these tools become so powerful. And we think about use cases that, of course, people can implement, but then they have these tools and they go off and do really amazing things for their patients, really.
Absolutely. I think we saw too, this demonstrated through those sessions, the flexibility of our tools and seeing how many different ways they're being used. And, we saw public health representatives share. We saw cutting edge precision medicine use cases presented. We saw connectivity being demonstrated that was imperative to the pandemic response and connecting immunization data. The breadth was huge. I thought I'd take a moment too on this slide. We can call out the picture at the bottom. That was all the Lineate attendees. I didn't take a tally, but we had representatives from across Lineate there. Many of our customers were meeting people they work with day to day, from support and product management, for the first time in person.
Yeah, I wasn't able to attend that session. What was going on there? Is that like the ending of Saturday Night Live where the whole cast gets up on stage to shake hands?
Pretty much. Scott Solbari asked us all to come up and share some observations about the conference. He had us dancing too. That was something that only the people in person will ever get to see. But it was really special for the people on our team to share what they had learned throughout the week. Some people interact with customers every day. Some people are a little bit more removed from customers, like in a marketing content role, and just having the opportunity to hear directly was very, I think, rewarding for people. And then the customers actually took the mic, and I'll share this because we couldn't let everyone from support attend the conference because we needed people to still be available to support the customers. And the customers really thanked Lineate for providing the tools that help them solve problems and challenges, and the teams for being so responsive to helping them when they run into an error or when they need to think outside of the box. And so really appreciated hearing the customers' thanks directly. So Drew, it was a pretty great session. That's what was happening at bottom there.
And then we had our own stage selfie, Kevin and Brian. I think It only took
Yeah,
us
when
a couple tries.
Kevin Day had AWS on stage, and he wanted to send a selfie home to his family, and that was before they started talking about cloud and how to protect cloud and security, and so that was fun getting the audience really involved. And this is one of the core point sessions, yep, up in the corner from the deep dive.
Yes, I think that's the roundtable session on the last day. Yeah. I think on the next slide too, we have maybe we already passed it, a photo of Sean's in the Rhapsody deep dive. Well, that's the one before. I think we've got training on this slide, pretty packed training room. And then Tom and Ken Wu's presentation about Envoy's use in care syntaxes architecture.
I think, Shelley, you attended the care syntax session, right? What you want to share a little bit more about that one? I wasn't able to attend, but I thought it would be useful for all people on the webinar.
Absolutely. You can see me in the front row completely enthralled in my blue shirt, not taking pictures up close like I should have been, and recording, man. And speaking of recordings, we will have some of our sessions posted for everyone to view. But for those who are customers that are listening, the slides are all posted from the presentations for you now on the user community. But the care syntax session really resonated with me as it connects to my why for being in healthcare IT, in that care syntax is working to make the surgeon and patient experience in surgery safer, reducing medical errors through the use of AI. And they're leveraging Envoy, our interoperability as a fully managed service, to lighten the burden on their own engineers so that we manage the integrations, we manage the infrastructure, and then their engineers are focusing on their core competencies, that value add of what care syntax does to inform and the surgical experience. And that one was particularly interesting and technical in that Envoy was being used as care syntax was entering a new international market. So of course, with that comes new data privacy laws to navigate and other considerations cross-culturally that need to be navigated to work with the teams needed to exchange the data that power their workflows.
They're growing pretty rapidly then worldwide.
They are, yeah. Hey, and I think we have a picture of what some of our PAX general sessions look like here. So you can see the full technical setup on the left, the stage on the right, and then the room packed full of attendees across customers, partners, and Lineage.
That was the Healthy Data, Healthy People panel?
I think so. Yeah.
That was a really nice session, I thought, that you pulled together of customers and partners talking about, this concept of healthy data, healthy people we introduced as a theme for Connect, and it seemed to really resonate as a connecting point across providers and, healthcare technology solution vendors that were there, that they're everybody can agree that we're trying to improve the quality of data to improve outcomes. And so I heard that really come through loud and clear on this panel that included customers from multiple segments, different parts of the healthcare system.
Yeah, that session was great. It turned up a lot of activity that our customers have been doing, but for me, the cool thing was their focus on what's next. They talked about how far they've come, but they were talking also about where they're going from here. So that was one of my favorite sessions.
And I think they highlighted cybersecurity, like how they protect data. That was a common theme throughout the conference that people really seem to rally around. I know I participated in a session with Kevin and our Chief Compliance Officer, Samir, about security, and everyone's having increased phishing attacks. And so I heard it come up in this session and another session that's just adding another layer of pressure and complexity to working with data.
Wow, and I think
and this is Tim from Geisinger. Geisinger was on the panel as well, and they really shared about they're one of the, I think, most kind of early innovators in information sharing, and I appreciated hearing from Kim how they're leveraging multiple solutions from Lineage, the integration engines, the identity, and the terminology to facilitate data exchange across their ambulatory, acute, and their health information exchange, KeyHi, right, Drew?
Yeah. They have the HIE, which is KeyHi, but they also have the payer and the provider sides of the organization. So they have a lot of like they're doing almost everything that we think about in healthcare interoperability, and so they have a lot of projects going on, and they use a lot of our tools.
This was the first time that we had, obviously the first time we've done Connect in person since before 2020, but also with the recent mergers of NextGate and HealthTerm, it was really nice to meet so many identity customers. I see in the, on the bottom picture here, several folks who are using the EMPI, and some of those are leveraging Rhapsody to move data in and out the identity. But I found bringing people together, even talking about different technologies, they were able to share use cases and best practices. That was another takeaway for me.
Absolutely, and I would say on that picture on the backside, you also saw we had a bit of our own mini exploration floor. And one thing our customer called out to us after was, they don't get the chance to go to HIMSS and some of the big trade shows, so they enjoyed having the opportunity to learn what some of these innovators and other players at that infrastructure interoperability layer are doing. We had 10 different partners.
Shelly, I thought you and the team did a really nice job to get a wide breadth of partners able to share. I don't know if you want to highlight, you were probably just about to highlight them.
Yeah, you mentioned one already. We had AWS there to help us support the message of what cloud migration gets our customers in terms of security, resiliency, and the benefits from an economic standpoint. We also had some EMPI partners there, E4 and Locate. We're able to show how we integrate with them, like Locate, for example, with the location services. We have some professional service partners there that we use, and also some patient engagement, consumer-facing applications that we integrate with. Any particular customers or partners that you'd like to call out, Drew?
Yeah, Veronovum is an interesting one. Actually, Mike from Veronovum was on the panel that we talked about on the last slide. They do a lot of data cleansing and cleanup, and so they fill in a complementary piece to our infrastructural products, because we're good at the integration, identity, and terminology, but they sort of bring it all together and put the package around it for understanding the state that the data is in before they get a hold of it, figuring out where they can make the best cleanup options to raise the quality of the data. And then at the end, they're producing things like analytics and quality metrics that are informed by a much higher quality of data than what you could do prior to them looking at it. And it's the perfect example of our customers and our partners doing things with our tools that we had not anticipated, or that we couldn't do ourselves. And so that's why they make the perfect partnership for us. And I should mention, we're at the health conference in Las Vegas this week, and it just wrapped up yesterday. A lot of these same companies are here exhibiting at that conference. So we're excited to be part of that dynamic digital health ecosystem.
It's always a little, candidly, it's always a little nerving to set up like a trade show type of party, right? When you're hosting anything, you always wonder, well, who's going to come? Are people going to feel good about this? And so what you said, Shelly, at the beginning of this slide really landed on me, that our customers are so busy building integrations and identity, they're not often the ones who are traveling to trade shows and getting to interact with other vendors of technologies they're not using. And the jobs that they're trying to get done, in many cases, would benefit from adjacent technologies that they're just having to read about on the website, or there's so many competing technologies that even figuring out which ones to learn about can be overwhelming. And so hearing them say like, oh, this is really nice that you've curated this set of adjacent technologies and brought them here for me to meet with, so kind of one-stop shopping for me has been really helpful. That was terrific to hear, and kind of a new way for me to think about this type of opportunity for our partners and for our customers.
Absolutely. In a way, it like brought to life what we envision with the interoperability suite. Beyond what value we provide, we also can be that, through our own products, we are an advisor to our customers and others that we have seen this value work with on the ground with our products.
Yeah, I think sometimes, it's very easy to be thinking about our technology, leading with our technology, and we're always reminding ourselves about the people who are using the technology, and our goal is to connect the people who are using the technology, and the more that we can remove hurdles for them, like these solutions do, the better. Nicer.
Awesome. Well,
Cloud
getting
is hot topic.
Yeah, getting into the 4 topics we promised to cover. We've hit on a few already, naturally, through conversation. But Drew, you kicked us off with your keynote at the event, and part of that, you called out a trend you had been tracking last year and into this year, and it was cloud. Why the cloud migration? Why the shift to cloud computing? Were there any customer stories that you heard resonate, or any conversations you had after your keynote on that theme?
Yeah, and you mentioned some of them already with the Envoy stuff with care syntax, but yeah, we definitely track a large number of trends that are going on in healthcare, because we don't want to be surprised by them when they suddenly become relevant to our business. We need to understand them well upstream of when they're going to impact us. And I like to share a few of the major trends in that keynote each year. And I've been doing for 3 or 4 years now. So now we even have some data of how those trends are positioned on their trajectory year over year. And one that's been in the keynote from the beginning is cloud migration to cloud, because it's a strange topic in healthcare. Healthcare adopted the cloud quite slowly because healthcare data is protected at a very high level. And so it's traditionally been something that IT departments wanted to keep on-prem under their control. And it wasn't until cloud computing really became secure and reliable and an obviously good risk that healthcare started to migrate to the cloud. But even then, the integration part of it, where we play, was slow to migrate to the cloud because it's difficult to tie together all of your systems when the integration capabilities are in the cloud. But what we've seen over the course of the pandemic is that really shifted things. When everybody's on lockdown, they can't go into the data center anyway. So it doesn't matter that your software is installed in your data center. You have to log in remotely. You may as well log in remotely to a cloud provider. Plus, there was a huge demand for new integration work during the pandemic. At the same time, there was some staffing shortages, and so the cloud gave a cost-effective way to quickly scale. And for me, I think the main thing there is speed to implementation. When you leverage the cloud, you don't have to procure hardware or manage and maintain software. It's much quicker to provision resources in the cloud and get up and running. So that was the theme that I picked up on during Connect was whatever else you think about cloud, it's definitely a quick way to add capacity, and you can do it on a much shorter time frame. You don't have to plan for it in your annual budgeting cycles and try to figure out next year what you're going to need. You can move much quicker. So it's really been interesting for us. We've seen it in our own customer base. We went from just a handful of cloud customers a few years ago to over 130 this year are hosted in the cloud, which is still a small fraction of our customers, but it's growing quickly. It's growing at a high growth rate.
What about you, Michelle? Anything resonate with you as far as what Lineate's doing to help our customers on this path, or when customers are seeking Lineate cloud solutions?
Yeah, I mean, you call them out here, and you mentioned, but the staffing shortages, or what I heard, even Nova Scotia describing during their session, maybe it's not even so much a shortage, but I think what I've heard people experiencing in particular in the last 2 years, is a need to really scale quickly, and they don't have the resources, or they don't have the ability to sort of add a lot of resources quickly that they may not need forever. And so the cloud has allowed a level of managed service or vendors to access and take on that, offload that staffing work, or be even more tightly partnered with companies filling in the staffing gaps in a way that was much more difficult to do before the technology was in the cloud so much. And then M&A, I know, is on here, and this is a real passion point of mine, because as organizations are acquiring and divesting, when I'm spending time with providers, they're saying we're always acquiring an organization with an integration engine. Part of the integration of the new company is to figure out how do we consolidate those, do we leave them independent? And I really love the idea that the cloud can operate in a hybrid model. So you leave CorePoint or Rhapsody running how it always has, and you do the short-term work in the cloud to meet that near-term business demand. So the flexibility that the cloud brings is really, I know we've used that word a lot here, but over and over at Connect, I heard stories of customers doing things they would have otherwise been hampered to do without their movement to the cloud.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just like the example I already mentioned with Care Syntax, and having the flexibility to kind of, in a way, outsource a portion of what their team does, so their team could move faster on the value add work.
Right.
Next year, accelerating the outcomes that can be possible.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And another theme we heard throughout, we had a couple sessions Thursday focused on how organizations are working with APIs and what they're doing in their interoperability infrastructure to support faster adoption of APIs. I called out a couple of examples already where customers are using APIs to query syndromic surveillance data from public health entities, or using it to connect with digital health applications. In particular, we had Nova Scotia Health Authority share how they're using APIs in our Rapid API Gateway to connect to a provincial immunization tracking application. What resonated with you, Michelle and Drew, about what our customers shared and how they're working with APIs, or what's motivating them to learn more and take them on?
Yeah, I mean, again, Mark, you mentioned Mark presented from Nova Scotia, but others, what resonated with me was they're doing API work, they're feeling pressure or at least interest in moving to FHIR, not necessarily, positive how to leverage existing technology to do that, or knowing that they need to do more to protect their API communication. And I know we've been talking about Rapid. For us, it's old news. For those of us in Lineate, this is a problem with marketing. You hear your own story so much that you start to think it's old, but Connect reminded me that it's new, and it was such a good opportunity for Nova Scotia and other customers to start to hear about how Lineate Rapid can sit in front of CorePoint and Rhapsody and really be this guardian on their digital front door. And so all of this API communication, whether it's connecting electronic health record data with Salesforce.com, or connecting to digital engagement applications, or patient, PHRs, it's just the volume of API traffic is increasing so much, and that landed on me quite heavily at Connect.
Yeah, I think when APIs sort of came on the scene, well, I mean, the flavor of APIs we're mostly talking about in healthcare is FHIR APIs. I know there's other ones that are relevant, but when FHIR came on the scene a few years ago, that was the big question was, will this supplant HL7 v2? And if so, how quickly? And our position, Lineate's position at the time was, we've seen it before, where a new technology or a new standard comes out, and there's some perception that it may replace what came before, but effectively what we've seen is that they exist side by side. So when new standards come out, they don't usually displace the old ones. They usually provide new and different capabilities that complement the existing standards. And
even when they're really hot, right?
Exactly. So FHIR has been around long enough now that I think we've proven the point that it's here to stay, but it's not displacing HL7 v2. And so I think that's one thing that I think we can say pretty definitively at this point. But the other thing that I think is interesting is, our customers, our users are accustomed to taking on any integration challenge. They can, we had one customer who was collecting electronic lab results, and he said, we have flexible tools, we have people who are clever and creative about how to get data from even the most impenetrable systems. So if you send me a lab result that you've written on a cocktail napkin and hand it to me, we can figure out how to turn it into an electronic message and get it into our system. And that's obviously an exaggeration. But our customers are accustomed to being able to get data just by looking at an interface specification, figuring out how to configure the tool to do what they need to do to build an interface. And that's no different with APIs. It's a departure from the older types of integrations, but at the end of the day, it's a HTTP request, it's a API call, and then it's a structured payload that you're parsing. And so, I think the biggest hurdle to FHIR adoption is maybe the intimidation of the size of the standard that you have to consume. But when you get down to brass tacks and say, I want to build this really specific interface that requires FHIR, I think when you're doing the implementation in any of our tools, it becomes straightforward and natural. It's not harder than any other integration we've ever done. And we now have a critical mass of customers who have taken on the challenge of building FHIR interfaces. And that's what they've seen, is that it's completely achievable. Since it is here to stay, they're starting to look at ways to make it repeatable and abstracting best practices out of their experiences. But the question of can we do it or should we do it is now retired. It's the answers are yes, and now the question is how do we best accomplish it and make it efficient.
Absolutely.
Reminds me we should probably to plug the FHIR basics training, like for anybody who is on the phone and feeling intimidated. I think the FHIR basics class is like a good place to get started, Drew, or where would?
Yeah, that's where I got started.
Look at you now.
And yeah, I remember I had a conversation with someone at Connect 2 who was starting to unwrap, how to take on FHIR and realizing the different terminology sets and code sets that would be required with certain specs, like when exchanging labs, the LOINC requirement. It also came up in the context of, with information blocking 21st century cures requiring US CDI and US CDI also requiring LOINC, and they're sharing how many of the labs they get back are not coded to LOINC. So it brought up an interesting intersection between how our customers are working with APIs and then also where they might have a terminology management need as they start taking on more APIs to standardize to be able to comply with FHIR in the cure specs. All right, our third topic is actually just that, talking a bit about a broader enterprise data management and how our customers were thinking about managing identity and terminology data within the context of their organizations. We had one session called Be a Champion for Healthy Data that we're going to rehash next month. So we hope you'll join us next month to dive more into this topic. But it prompted some great discussion with the healthcare system players we had in the room when we pulled up, and Jesse Eichhorn, one of our product marketers, pulled up these statistics that 86% of nurses, physicians, and IT practitioners say they have witnessed or know of a medical error that was the result of a patient misidentification, and that 76% of lab data is not mapped to the standard LOINC coding. What were your
things down, huh?
Yeah, it's slumbering.
This wasn't at Connect, but thinking of nurses and physicians and IT practitioners who witnessed an identity error. I was making a purchase recently, like through Craigslist, and the guy I was buying from was an anesthesiologist, and he shared that he was like nearing retirement and decided to retire after this incident where he had a patient admit through the emergency room who was experiencing kind of symptoms of a brain injury, and the patient shared that his wife shared that he had recently had surgery, like brain surgery, and the ED staff was like looking at the record and said, no, that didn't happen. But it turned out to be a mistaken case of identity. There was a new registration that occurred, but there was another record for that patient in that system with the surgical record attached to it. And there was, you know, I think 70% of data is inaccurate and complete. Sorry, 30% of data is inaccurate, incomplete, or inconsistent, and that plays out in these ways that prohibit people from being found when you do a search. And in this case, you know, this guy was delayed accessing the level of service that he really needed because of the disconnect in the patient record. And so when you hear stories like that, it makes the 86% very personal. And just seeing that number always reminds me that I'm sure we all know multiple nurses and physicians who have seen this problem, and yet identity is such it's like one of these problems where people think it's being solved well enough until you really start to look at the data. And that's why I think that EMPI, Enterprise Master Person Index, was commoditized for a long time. And 2 years ago, Gartner said, this is no longer a commodity because this problem is even bigger than it was before. As data exchange multiplies and the number of participants in the healthcare system that need to share data and contribute data to be shared, that problem manifests from a duplicate record problem to a connected record problem, which is, you know, why we invested in Enterprise Master Person Index and why such an opportunity for our customers to do so. I think that the technology's come a long way, and so has the problem. And yeah, that really landed on me.
What were you buying from an anesthesiologist on Craigslist? This sounds sketchy.
I know, it was like a small boat, a little small sailboat.
Oh, okay, good. No, I think that's it's a sign of the times that there was a point in time not that long ago when the majority of patient records were kept on paper, and this problem didn't exist, but or it existed in a different form perhaps, but as data started to become electronic, two things happened. One is you know, this problem of matching the EMR records became a thing. But secondly, you know, just having data in an electronic format encourages the production of even more data. When you have to write data on charts, it's a manual task. You do as little as possible. When it's in a computer, you can copy and paste. You can generate quite a lot of data in a computer, which is great because it provides a much richer description of the encounters that happen with a lot more detail. But it explodes the amount of data that's out there, and it turns this data management problem into something that we have to pay attention to, which is new for us at Lineate. You know, prior to this year, we focused on the structural integration problems of mapping one data format to another. We hadn't really cared that much about who the data was about or what the data was about, and you know, it was our observation that those were becoming bigger and bigger subjects of inquiry among our customers, and so that's why we moved into those spaces of identity and terminology.
I think you illustrated the enterprise data management play quite well in your keynote, Drew, by showing the breadth it must cover at that cross-organizational interop layer for it to be meaningful. So that it's no longer just exchanging the data point to point and data liquidity, but what we can do to enrich and augment it to ensure it's timely, accurate, meaningful to the people who need it to provide the care that drives the outcomes that we're talking about today.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if the only kind of interoperability you care about is systems within an organization's four walls, you can agree on a patient identifier. You can let the EMR drive, you know, how to identify patients. The problem is that, well, the challenge, I guess, is that most organizations are now bringing in many different types of data within their organization, from HR systems or inventory systems, finance systems, but they're also exchanging data with other organizations. And once you do that, you lose control, that tight control over patient identity and over code set mapping, and now you have to negotiate or cooperate with those with those other systems, those other organizations, so that you can agree on what the data is talking about and who the data is talking about. And that's a hard enough problem that it needs its own software solution.
Do you think that, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people attending the call today are integration analysts, and when you think about the multiple levels of interoperability, it sounds complicated and hard. Like, where did either of you hear just kind of any really pragmatic lessons or takeaways from Connect about where people or how people have tackled complex problems as they kind of move across these different layers of interoperability? What I heard kind of, go ahead. Go ahead. I felt like I was teeing up a really tough question, so maybe if you have one.
It is a tough question, and before I answer it, maybe I'll just restate it that yeah, interoperability is hard. It's why we're in business, right? And for me, it's a little frustrating because a lot of the more end user facing software solutions think about interoperability either as an afterthought, something they're going to bolt on later, or they think it's an easy problem. You know, how hard can it be to move data from point A to point B? And the fact is that there's quite a lot there, and it's not an easy problem. It takes a lot of equipment and a lot of people to solve those problems and make those connections flow efficiently. And if everyone does their job well, then it appears to be an easy problem, and that contributes to the impression that interoperability is or should be easy. And it's really a hard data management problem that we're going to be struggling with, because the data that we care about in healthcare is not static. The data we care about today is much more sophisticated and relevant than the data we cared about 5 years ago, and it's not as sophisticated as the data we're going to care about in the next 5 years. And my favorite example of this is social determinants of health. My favorite current example is SDOH. 10 years ago, we weren't even talking about it. It didn't even have a name. There was no such thing. There was such a thing, but nobody was studying it. And then it started to get on the radar, and software systems started putting those concepts into their features. And then there was a little bit of a backlash in the interoperability world of why can't we interoperate social determinants of health? And it's because there wasn't even a standard for expressing them yet. There was no data standard for moving social determinants data around. There is now, and so now we can start to tackle that problem in a repeatable, structured way. But that's an example of interoperability always having to keep up with the clinical thinking that's going on, and because of that, there's never going to be an endpoint to interoperability. It's always going to be a capability that matures and evolves in parallel with everything else that's going on in healthcare.
Yeah, and I think why you why you have to put solutions in place that are flexible to adapt as the requirements evolve versus counting. I always think about remodeling. It could be because I live in a remodel, but if you sort of try to solve a plumbing issue and you just surface level, like replace your fixtures, but you don't go deep and put in new, PVC or replace the copper, then you're going to be dealing with that at some point after you do the drywall. Like ideally you replace the plumbing and then do the drywall, not do the drywall and then have to rip out the drywall to do the plumbing. And so, the same concept here is put strong foundation in place. So then as you have these new requirements, like, oh, we want to install a new chandelier or something, you already have the electric in place to be able to do that and support whatever requirements come down the pike later.
Absolutely, and that flexibility too, to take on those non-standard data types that we just heard over and over again at Connect that customers are connecting to. Also, Salesforce connectivity come up a couple times. Hear it all the time too.
And the number. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and then the different types of like trading partners. I'm just looking at your slide now. You can't even anticipate which kinds of partners you may be sharing data with next year. And so the more prepared you can be, the better.
Hey, that brings us to our last point. As customers are taking on more trading partners and opening up more endpoints externally to trade data, security, one-on-one with patient safety. Drew sent me a white paper recently, and the title was, I believe it was, Cybersecurity equals patient safety, and that resonated with me. We talked so much here at Lineate about how interoperability and cybersecurity and privacy are one and the same. You can't have one without the other. To preach to the choir, I'm sure, for the attendees here at this webinar now and in the future. So we had a panel, Michelle, that you moderated and did a great job moderating with Kevin, our Chief Technology Officer, and Samir, our information security expert in the organization. So.
Yeah, and I was impressed, by the audience asking questions about how we've protected internally our systems to ensure like our cloud applications are safe, and also one of the things that came up from the audience was just around phishing and how the amount of phishing that's occurring across every organization has increased so much, and people's fear that, even though as technical, I'm going to include myself in the group, as technical people, we feel confident in our ability to catch things like that, but we worry about, at the endpoint of the organization that not everyone is going to be able to be as focused in finding those phishing attempts and so forth. And so like the amount of risk and how to minimize that risk really seemed to be top of mind for attendees. And it was nice that Samir and Kevin were able to share some of the best practices like Know Before that we've implemented at Lineate, and to kind of have everybody have this opportunity to relate around how stressful and tough cybersecurity is.
Yeah, October was Cybersecurity Month, so that was happening in parallel with Connect. The thing that strikes me is that with cybersecurity, defense has to be perfect. It has to be 100%. But on the offensive side, the hackers, they don't have to be perfect. They only have to find one gap in the defenses to get through. And furthermore, the cyber attackers, it's their only job. They're spending all of their time trying to hack healthcare systems, and on the defense side, that's not our only job. The mission of a hospital is much broader than keeping the bad guys out. So it's very asymmetrical in terms of the threat, which means it's hard. It's something that has to be constantly monitored and improved. It's another thing like interoperability. It doesn't stand still. It's the cyber threats we're facing today are so much more sophisticated than 5 years ago, and they're not as sophisticated as what we'll see in the next 5 years. So it's not something that you can do once and say, put a check next to it and say, we've done that. It's something that you have to do constantly. And that's why it's cool that October is Cybersecurity Month, because it gets people focused on it at least once a year, and keeps the concepts fresh in everyone's mind. And so I think that's a important counterpoint to interoperability is cybersecurity.
Absolutely. It seems like attendees felt that way as well.
Well, hey, we filled our time, Drew and Michelle. So we were able to.
Yeah, and I saw a question about the recording. So just will remind people that this will be available as a recording afterward. And and then somebody's. Yeah. So we will make it available. This whole presentation will be available to attendees.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for your time, everyone who tuned in now and is tuning in the future as we recapped our high points from Connect 2022, which we're learning how our customers are creating healthier outcomes with healthier data provided by Lineate Solutions.
Thanks, Shelley, for hosting us.
Thank you.
Bye, Drew.